Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this FlexJobs webinar on ageism and the remote job search. We have some really great information that we are going to share with you today. While we're giving everyone a minute to get in to Big Marker and get situated, please feel free to share where you're joining from in the chat section. This does a few things. This lets us know where you're joining from, and we love to see where around the world you are. It also gets you familiar with the different areas in Big Marker. The chat section is a really great place to communicate with us, communicate with other attendees, and share any other resources that you may have come across on the topic as we are going through the content. We do have a Q&A portion of this presentation, and for any question that you have, please go ahead and make sure that you add that to the Q&A section of Big Marker. That's where the career expert at the end of the presentation will be able to answer those questions. If you are in the Q&A section and you see somebody else's question that you are also curious about, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up as well. A couple other pieces of housekeeping to go over before we get into our content. We are recording this presentation, and we always send a link to the recording and any resources that are relevant to the email address that you used when you registered. So you should see that within the next several days. If you don't see it and you're looking for it, please check your spam folder in your email. Sometimes these emails do end up being flagged for spam, even though they aren't, but that's where you will find that. Please also note the beginning portion of this presentation has been pre-recorded, but the Q&A afterwards is going to be and always will be live with a career expert. So we are here looking forward to answering those questions. And again, just a second reminder to put those questions that you have in the Q&A section of Big Marker versus the chat section. This is really where our career expert can keep track of all of the questions and make sure we're getting to the questions that you guys are adding. So let's go ahead and dive in to today's topics. So what we're going to talk about, we're going to start and we are going to go through some of the current remote job trends that we are seeing. We're going to, of course, dive into the topic of ageism. That's what we are here to discuss today. So we'll talk about common and subtle signs for employers' ageist assumptions. We really want to give you some actionable items that you can take with you so that you can focus the employer's attention on your application on the right things to sort of remove any focus from ageism. And also we can talk a little bit about how you can stand out specifically when you're applying to remote jobs. So let's talk about some of the current trends that we are seeing right now. I don't think that we can argue about the fact that the last 4 years since 2020 have really changed the course of remote work for the long term. We've changed how we conduct our daily work since 2020. And this is so interesting to me, these statistics, that prior to 2020, so 2019, less than 5% of US employees worked from home full time. And this was a Census American Communities survey. So that was a very, not a very high percentage of people that were working from home regularly. And then if we look at June of 2023, 66% of US employees work from home either in a hybrid or completely remote model. So hybrid means you're splitting some time between an office space, the company's space, and then your home, most likely your home office. And completely remote means, you don't have to go into the office. So Zippia found that people are working an average of 5.8 days remote per month for those folks who are working in a hybrid environment. Experts predict that there will be just over 36 million Americans working remotely in 2025. So remote work is not going anywhere. In fact, 36 million Americans is over a 400% increase from pre-pandemic levels, where there were only 7 million people working remotely. So remote and hybrid opportunities have certainly grown over the last 4 years. FlexJobs saw an increase of remote job postings of 11% in 2023 over 2022. However, this is or was a slower rate of growth than we saw from 2022 to 2021. So while 2023 did provide steady remote job options throughout the year, larger workplace trends such as layoffs, return to office mandates, slowed hiring for corporations, and a cooling job market. This was reflected in the slight slowdown of the overall number of remote openings. We also have seen a significant increase in people searching for remote jobs as well, making finding a remote job very competitive. Those of you that are here and have been in the job search for a while probably understand that. Remote and hybrid jobs are attracting 3 to 7 times more applicants than in-person roles. However, if you are doing things like coming to events like this, learning how you can position yourself in the strongest way possible for your application and pursuing, some of these other resources, you are positioning yourself ahead of those people who are not doing these types of things. So thank you for being here today. Now, for those of you that are looking for fully remote jobs, or and that's the most interesting to you, and we find that is predominantly what people are looking for, although there are many people that are interested in working in a hybrid position as well. I wanted to highlight the top fields for remote and flexible jobs and the top remote job titles for you based on our data over the last year. Typically, we do see computer, accounting, finance, and marketing as top remote fields that historically they've had a robust remote job offering for people, but also areas in, the medical and health industry, project management, customer service, sales, admin, HR, and operations are all top remote fields. Here are some job titles that, may be interesting to you too, in terms of the top remote job titles that tend to fit with the top industries, I suppose: accountant, executive assistant, financial analyst, product manager, of course, customer service rep, customer success manager. We see software engineer, writer, product designer, and account manager represented as well. Now, here is a sample of some age-friendly companies, and since 2005, the Age Friendly Institute, which has a lot of resources, has identified companies who are committed to being the best places for people over the age of 50 to work. Through the Institute's Certified Age-Friendly Employer, CAFE program, hundreds of companies have earned this distinction. I really just have included 10 on here because, as it turns out, many of those hundreds of companies also hire for flexible positions. So with any job search, if you've been to some of our other webinars, we may have mentioned, or that one of the things that you can do to focus your job search is to find companies that you are interested in working for and really sort of engineer your search by trying to network and find positions that are available in these companies. So if ageism is one of your concerns, considering or focusing on some of the companies that who are committed to hiring people over a certain age can be helpful. And this sampling of folks on the slide are people who we have on the FlexJobs site or have had before, of course, with jobs that they offer that are remote or flexible type work arrangements. And so this might be something that you can use in terms of your research for where you want to focus your efforts in terms of applying for jobs. All right, so let's jump more into the topic of ageism. That is what we are here to talk about today. I want to do a little exercise. So if you remember where the chat area is, I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think are some common assumptions that a hiring manager may make about an older worker. And if you'd like, please feel free to enter those in the chat box so we can see what everyone's thinking. All right, we're starting to see some information come in. And here are some possible assumptions I'm seeing come into the chat, as well as, some of the things that we have on the slide. Now, at times, there are a few things that an employer might assume about a candidate because of their age, if they're able to get an idea of what it is. So it's important to note that often these assumptions are not deliberate. This is something that is subconscious on their part. And this really is just part of human nature, honestly. So we as people tend to categorize others and put them in easy to understand boxes. But as we get an idea of what some of those assumptions or wrong assumptions may be, we can take steps to guard against them. So let's read some of these common assumptions. Things like not being able to learn new skills or no desire to learn new skills. Potential hiring people might think that a candidate who is older hasn't kept up with the needed skills or knowledge required to do the work. They are overqualified. They will get bored. They lack the energy and enthusiasm and interest in the company or in the role. They assume that somebody who is older is not up for a challenge and or doesn't want to be managed. And finally, people can assume that you might not want to be at an organization for a long time. And the last bullet really, I guess it's somewhat understandable, but maybe you have no plans to retire soon. Your plan is not to retire anytime soon, but this is something that the employer may question, and it's something that you can, be prepared for if you understand that it's an assumption that someone might be making. All right, here are some ways that employers can make those assumptions about your age. And again, as I said, it's mostly subconscious, but things like a resume format that's outdated, recruiters and hiring managers really can easily tell the difference between a resume that was created according to standards that are 10 years old or older in some cases, rather than the current format that's being used today. And we'll talk about that next, more specifically with examples. If you list a technology section on your resume, which we do recommend, but the software that you list is outdated, or the certifications that you have are expired, or any skills that are no longer required for the type of work that you are trying to do, and also you aren't including any new or current software and tech tools, for example, something like AI, which has been really big lately. If you have a social media profile or a LinkedIn profile, and the photo that you're using was taken 10 or 15 years ago, and you can really tell that it represents that era, this can be a flag to some employers that it's not, even if it's not an accurate representation, because it isn't, because it's from 10 to 15 years ago versus something that's more current. If you have an email address like Hotmail, AOL, Juno, or Earthlink, those are internet service providers or email service providers that aren't as common anymore. And those can signify that you've had that email address for a really long time, and it can help contribute to assumptions that an employer might make about you. On your resume, if you list more than 10 to 15 years experience, this is something that signals a long time of working. So people might assume or try to guess what your age is. If you have graduation dates on your education that are more than 5 years old, most recruiters do not want to see older information because they feel that it is likely not relevant to the newer or current tech or ways of doing things in the role you're applying for. You can always talk about stories and anecdotes and times in your career from previous to what you're sharing on your resume, but you don't need to do this on your document that's going to get you the interview, or you don't need to do this when you're marketing yourself on LinkedIn. The main goal is to make an employer focus on the qualifications that they are looking for in the job that they are hiring for right now, not the fact that you are a certain age. Another thing that you can avoid and adjust is using really formal language on a cover letter or in your cover letter. If you can't find the specific person to address it to, don't use "to whom it may concern" anymore. Use something that's more casual but still professional, like "Dear Hiring Manager," or even more specific to the team, "Hello, customer service team." And we share these things, and these are good rules of thumb, but always keep in mind that while there are common procedures in job search, there isn't one formula. So often what you're doing when you're applying to jobs, you're aiming at a moving target, and different companies and recruiters might process or look at things differently. So that's why as you're going through your job search, you always want to be evaluating what's working and making adjustments. But let's go ahead. As promised, I said we would look at a resume. Let's take a look at this resume and type in the chat. So please let me know in the chat some things that can signal that this applicant is over 40. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. All right, so I see some things coming in. Objective statement, yes. Old fonts and formatting. One of the things that I think is important to note is that listing the full street address is something that isn't done anymore. So that can signify a dated resume. You see the email address is Hotmail, but more importantly, it says Seasoned J 66. People who are looking at email addresses might be thinking, is that the year this person graduated? Is that the year this person was born? Is that, they're not thinking it's somebody's favorite number. And so one of the things that you want to do is make sure that your email address, not only is it using a current internet service provider, but also the email address doesn't give away anything in your age. This person, having been born in 66, you could do the math and see how old they are. We mentioned objective statement rather than a summary or skills section. The work experience is really long. It's 2001 to 2010 is the latest or the last job that's listed. That's a little old. There isn't a technology section. I noticed graduation dates as well. And right underneath the education, it does say references available upon request. That is not something that you need to or should be adding to your resume right now. So there are several things just in this resume document, and this one's only one page, that you can do to guide an employer's focus in a different direction. So how are we going to do that? Now, listen, we're not trying to pull a fast one on our application or with the employer to hide your age or to fool anybody. That's not the point of this. What we're trying to do initially is to push age down the list of things employers pay the most attention to. The goal is not to lie or pretend or erase the fact of your age, that you are a certain age. The goal is to make an employer focus on your qualifications and your accomplishments more than they focus on the fact that you are a certain age. Because of course, eventually when you do an interview, when you start working, they will find out how old you are. You'll fill out that paperwork, but reducing or reorganizing the data recruiters get and look at that focuses more on what a great candidate you are will and can reduce the ageism piece or the age factor that you're facing when you're applying for jobs. Okay, so here are some main goals. As I said, you want to focus the employer's attention on your most recent and most relevant experience. Hiring managers want to see the most current and relevant experience you have for the job that you are applying to. So detailing specific but long ago dates on your resume may unnecessarily call attention to your age. To get them interested in your great credentials, you might want to consider, something like launching a website or a personal blog if that fits the industry that you're in, and if you truly have a deep level of expertise in your career field. On your resume, cover letter, and in the interviews that you have, you definitely want to exude and show energy, enthusiasm, and a growth mindset. And what you don't want to do is allow them to subconsciously process those little signals that we talked about earlier. These here are the goals. So you're going to control what you can to meet these goals. Here are some things that are within your control when it comes to preventing ageism from happening in the first place. We saw an old resume. So you definitely want to update your resume to a current format that doesn't have an objective statement or references available upon request statements on them. Traditionally, or not traditionally, but it used to be that you'd open with an objective statement and you'd close with references available upon request. So your open and close of your resume are different now. You're going to use a profile summary, and you're not even going to put references available on request on your resume. Make sure that you don't include very long, drawn out career histories, and know that you might have and you may have extensive credentials. Resist the urge to detail everything you've achieved in your career. Recruiters typically feel that anything older than 10 to 12 years old is irrelevant anyway. So make sure you are comfortable and able to edit down some of the things from your career. This document that you are sharing, your resume, is you want to share the, most relevant skills and experiences that you have to the job that you are applying for. So concentrate on the skills you have that are on the job posting for the position you're applying for. Again, reflect your tech skills. We've talked about that a little bit, and stay up to date with technology in general because today's market really does demand it. You do not need to share your graduation dates on your resume. You want to have a current email provider. As we've been talking about, Gmail is probably the most popular, the one that we see most frequently. You can demonstrate and discuss your energy and enthusiasm in the summary portion of your resume, on your cover letter, and of course, while you're interviewing. And when you are in this process of looking for a job, you want to practice interviewing to make sure that you are giving up-to-date examples and highlighting the in-demand skills like they are on the job posting. All right. So how do we do this to stand out with remote employers? So many of us now have remote work experience, and some of us might think that we don't, but we actually do have a little bit of remote work experience. It doesn't have to be a formalized environment to highlight remote experience on your resume. For example, if you've ever messaged somebody that works on a different floor in your building, or you've worked with people on the other side of the world in different time zones, if you've taken your work home on a regular basis or contacted people by phone, email, or web conferencing in order to do your job, you have remote work experience, and you can highlight that. When you are targeting remote positions, it's important to highlight this remote experience and these remote skills. For example, in the summary statement or the summary section, you can mention something like 5 years of effective remote work experience, or experience collaborating and leading teams in distributed work environments. Try to stay away from stating over 20 years of experience, okay? A lot of us want to lead with the number of years of experience we have, but review the job posting, take note of the number of years experience they are looking for. Then just put a plus sign behind it if you have more years of experience than that. So for example, if they aren't specific, you might say 10 plus years comprehensive or extensive experience. If they say they want 5 years of experience, you would say more than 5 years, 5+ years of experience, and go into the rest of your profile summary. You can also put remote specific wording in line with your job title or employer location and within the bullets of your experience section. So you can see, you could list a job title as marketing coordinator that was hybrid remote. Or if you want to put the location of the company and that it was remote work, you can do it that way as well. You can also list the tools you've used to work remotely in the technology section of your resume, which we'll show you in a little bit. All right. So here are the top remote work skills we see or hear time and time again when we survey remote employers. These are the skills that are consistently noted as highly important for candidates to have. Employers need employees who can prioritize, handle the work that they're given, and rise to the occasion without somebody asking, hey, have you finished this project yet? That's not the kind of thing you're going to get when you work remotely because you're not in the same place. Employers want people who can communicate effectively when they work with people all over the world or on distributed teams. This is important, especially with written communication. Can you show and do you have skills like taking initiative to get things done? You have to be proactive in asking any questions to make sure you understand any expectations that somebody is giving to you, not only for you, but for the company. We've talked a lot about technology. Of course, when you work remotely, you're going to have some level of comfort with technology. You generally don't need to be an expert, right? But you want to be comfortable using a computer, using a phone, whatever tools you might need to use for the job you're applying for. And also a key piece of this is to be comfortable troubleshooting when there is a technology issue. You don't have to be the expert in a certain technology, unless you're in a tech field, I suppose, but you really want to reflect your ability to navigate platforms commonly used by remote employers. In terms of the troubleshooting, technology is great until it isn't and it's not working. So how do you problem solve when technology issues arise? Are you able to work through that process and try to do some investigation on your own and try to get to the bottom of it? Or does it make you panic and you stop? So you really have to be comfortable getting through some of those issues. Remote employers will want to know if you're comfortable doing a webinar, an interview, or talking to clients remotely, if that's something that your job requires, being client-facing, something that requires some form of digital technology. You want to be comfortable with those types of things because it allows us to connect with people all over the world at almost any time. Part of this, or you could wrap this all up in saying you really do need to have a growth mindset when you work remotely, and a willingness to change and learn new things is critical as well. If we've learned anything over the last few years, it's that change is constant. And so being able to embrace that change and to work through anything that comes up to pivot when needed is important for employers to see that you are willing to do. All right. We get asked a lot, what about experience that I have that's older than 10 years on my resume? So it is customary to only list 10 years, maybe 15 years if it's relevant. But there are times, of course, when it makes sense to include earlier experiences because it might directly, it should be, but it is directly related to the position that you're applying for, and it allows you to tell more of your career story. So here's the best way to do this. So on the screen, we have sort of the bottom part of a resume, professional experience, and this is the oldest job that's listed, starting in 2010. So that's 13 years ago. The job that this person did before 2010 as a cyber network defender in the Army is added into an additional related experience section. So in this section, you can add another of your older positions, or two if you want, but you don't need to include the dates. So what you're doing here is you're controlling the story of your career. You're giving the hiring manager a more full picture of what you've done, but you aren't putting any dates in there, which will avoid sort of some of those pitfalls of having 20 plus years of experience. And this is how you can do this. You don't have to include as many bullets. You don't have to be, 2 or 3, like in this entry, is plenty. And it just allows people to see that, oh, you did this work earlier, or this is something that you did earlier in your career and it would be helpful for the job that you are doing now. So including the relevant information is key, removing dates because it's not necessary in this section. All right, again to the technology skills section. Let's talk about this, because whether you've worked remotely before or not, reflecting to an employer your capability to communicate within a remote environment is critical. So on the slide, we have a few examples of what a technology section might look like on your resume. You might mention that you have document software, things like Microsoft Office Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Google Workspace, or Google Docs, Sheets, and Slides. Now, Microsoft Office, we do still see Microsoft Office and specific tools listed on job postings. So if it is listed on a job posting and you understand it, this is a good way to get some additional keywords. If you know remote collaboration tools, you want to be specific on those, things like Zoom, Skype, Google Chat or Google Hangouts. Those are important. If you know, Slack is a big one. So you will see using the job posting as a guide can kind of, for lack of a better word, guide you into how you highlight the technology skills or what technology skills that you include on your resume. Listen, you don't need to learn every single one of the technology tools that are out there, just a couple, and which couple you choose are the one you should prioritize based on what you're seeing in the job postings. There are always a lot of resources out there that are low cost or even free. And so I would certainly use Google to, do a Google search on how you can quickly learn, how to use Slack or something along those lines, if that's something that's required for the types of jobs that you're applying for. All right. So here are some things that you can do to overcome ageism and age discrimination in your job search in terms of taking these action steps. Understand what the signals are, what leads people to make some assumptions subconsciously. Review the materials that you have, like your resume, your cover letter, LinkedIn, and website, if applicable, and remove those age signals and at least manage them. All right. Set up your job search to focus on age-friendly companies. Do some research to see if there's some fits there that might interest you in terms of the type of company you'd like to work for. And then as you know the age signals, as you're reviewing your materials and you're putting your plan and your focus together, guide the employer to focus on your top skills, your key achievements and accomplishments for the role that you are applying for. And certainly for hybrid and remote work, show your technology know-how and the remote skills and experience that you have. So it's clear to the employer that you are ready, willing, and able to jump right into that type of work environment. All right, before we dive into the questions, just a reminder, we are emailing a copy of this recording and the resources that were used and that are relevant. So you'll have that within the next several days. If you have more ideas or questions about your job search, please don't forget to go to flexjobs.com blog, because there are thousands of articles on there for any aspect of your job search. So let's go ahead. We'll take some questions and see what everybody is looking to learn a little bit more about. Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. So we're going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar now. Before we dive into your questions, could someone let me know in the chat section if you're able to hear me clearly? All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. So my name is Keith Spencer, and I am one of our career experts here at FlexJobs, and I will be answering your questions for you. So once again, we will be in the Q&A section for the question and answer portion of this webinar. So make sure you are on that tab, and you can click a thumbs up button if you see a question that you would like to hear the answer to, so I know which questions are the most popular, because I will be answering the questions based on the number of upvotes. So our first question here says, how do you get around your age on a resume? So this was asked, before the presentation went over it, but let's just reiterate a couple things here. So in terms of your resume, your professional experience section, you only want to go back about 10 to 15 years. And, this is advice that I give to people regardless of their age, honestly, because you want to present the potential employer with the most recent and relevant work that you have. So going back just about 10 to 15 years, years tends to be your best bet there. And then, as was mentioned in the presentation, you can also include an additional related experience section if you have some experience that is, highly relevant to the job to which you are applying to, that, stretches beyond that 10 to 15 year range. So that's kind of step one in terms of getting around age on your resume. Another thing to keep in mind is the dates for your education. You don't need to list those on your resume. And in fact, that's another one that I give, another piece of advice that I give to people, regardless of age, unless you graduated, in the last year or two, really not worth putting your graduation date or your dates for education on your resume. So that's another thing that you could pull off of your resume. And then just some other general kind of practices, like making sure that you're using a, or not more traditional, a more common email provider, like, Gmail tends to be the most common one these days. Making sure that you're not using an objective statement, you're using a professional summary instead. All of those things will help you kind of take the focus away from your potential age and get it back onto your experience, which is what it should be the goal with all of these suggestions and efforts. So good question there. Never hurts to kind of recap some of what was discussed in the presentation. So thank you for asking that. All right, our next one here. Okay, so this was another one I believe was asked before this was mentioned in the presentation. But again, if you have more than 10 to 15 years experience, actually, this one's talking about LinkedIn profile. So I made an incorrect assumption there. So it says, if you have more than 10 to 15 years experience on your LinkedIn profile, should you delete the experience that is more than 15 years old? Really good question here. My recommendation would be a couple things. So look to see if any of your more recent experiences have you using the same skills, accomplishing the same kind of things. Like, is it redundant is what I'm trying to say with one of your more recent experiences. So if there's a lot of redundancy, a lot of overlap with some of your more recent experiences, then you could safely take off that experience that is beyond the 10 to 15 year range. So that's the first thing to kind of think of when considering your LinkedIn profile here. But if it is not redundant and it is worth keeping, then I say go for it, because once an employer is looking at your LinkedIn profile, once they are asking you to sit for an interview, they've already seen something that they really like about you. So that's kind of the point where your concerns about ageism should start to kind of lessen or sort of ebb away, because they've already seen that potential value in you. They've gotten interested in what you could potentially bring to the table. So it's okay if you were to go beyond that 10 to 15 year range on your LinkedIn profile. And it's also why, I tell people to, not, we frequently get questions about, well, should I, maybe dye away my grays before an interview or things like that. I say no. Don't try to hide who you are. Be yourself. If an employer, saw that interest or had that interest in you based on your resume, and then later decided after an interview, like, okay, I'm worried about this person's age, that's terrible. That's on them. And, in my mind, you might not agree with me, but that's not somewhere you would probably want to work anyway. So, I always say, like, don't try to hide who you are. What we're trying to do with, taking the focus off of age and putting it onto experience with the resume is just to try to get past some of those unconscious biases that people sometimes have. That's, it's kind of it's very similar to why, at least here in the United States, employers don't want, identifiers on your resume, really, like, pictures. That's kind of a big no-no. Some people put headshots on a resume. That's a big no-no here in the US, because, so many organizations now have, DEI initiatives, and they're trying to do everything that they can to remove bias from the hiring process. So, whether it's conscious or unconscious or subconscious, you want to just kind of take that focus away from your age and put it onto your experience. So sorry to go on a little bit of a diatribe there, but yeah. So don't if it's relevant and it's worth including on your LinkedIn profile, I say go ahead, keep it. If it's redundant and you've already said the same kind of things, but in a more recent experience, you could go ahead and leave that on your LinkedIn profile. But good question, and thank you for asking that. Okay, so our next one here. So it says, what should you do if you have no choice but to add in years to jobs, school, etc.? It won't let you go farther until you add the year. Do you leave that out? So I'm assuming you're asking about, online applications. Couple things here. You don't have to necessarily include all of your experience, like we've talked about. But with your education, you don't want to necessarily leave that out. So some of the things that you could do is you could, for your education dates, just put like 0000 for the year, or 9999 for the year, and then that would allow you to kind of get around entering those required dates for education. So that is something that you could do. Now, some employers, they might get frustrated if you do that, but oftentimes that's sort of a parameter that's not necessarily set by the hiring manager. It's just a default setting in the hiring software that they're using. So that would be my recommendation. Is it something you could leave off, like if it's experience, or if it's education, you could do the 4 nines or 4 zeros for the date instead. But very good question, and I appreciate you asking that. So let's go ahead and move on to our next one here. Let's see. So, best websites for remote opportunities for seniors. As was mentioned in the presentation, the one that I will point out, I really recommend checking out the Age Friendly Institute. If you went to, Google or another search engine and just typed in Age Friendly Institute, you should be able to find it. It should be the first one that comes up. And what they do is they list out all of their certified age-friendly employers. So what I would do from there is, start looking into, okay, what do these employers do? Look at their hiring pages. Are they hiring for anything that is, relevant or related to my skills and experience? That's the approach that I would probably take there. Working through the Age-Friendly Institute is kind of your best bet there. So that's the one that I would feel most comfortable recommending to you all, checking out the Age-Friendly Institute. Now, it's not necessarily a job board like FlexJobs is, but you could do kind of that reverse job search by, picking the companies that you like from that list, and then just kind of bookmarking their hiring page and checking periodically to see if they're hiring for any roles that, kind of meet your needs, your preferences, your experience, and your skills. So good question, and thank you for asking that one. Okay, so another good question here. So how long is a resume supposed to be? I feel like if I only have it at one page, they say, oh, you don't have experience. So how do you highlight all your qualifications? But then if it's too long, it gets rejected. Yeah, no, very, very good question. Very valid concern here. I personally have a 2-page resume. I think so. 1-page resumes, that used to be kind of the expectation, but that's no longer the case. You are permitted to have a multiple page resume. Now, that being said, I always tell people, just because you can have a resume that's more than one page does not mean you need to have a resume that is more than one page. Think about, redundancies, like I talked about earlier. Think about, the relevance of the things you're including on your resume to the position that you are applying for. You want to make sure that there is alignment there. You want to make sure that you are, not just kind of wasting the reader's time by including a lot of information that they don't necessarily need. So, just because you can go onto a second page doesn't mean you need to. I think the kind of ideal length is 2 pages. Now, if you've done a lot of things throughout your career, and they aren't redundant and all of the things you have done are highly relevant to the job to which you are applying, you could go on to a third page. That starts to get a little risky. They might, start to roll their eyes a little bit if they see a 3, 4, 5 page resume. Two is definitely safe. So that's, kind of my recommendation there. But the main point is no, you do not have to stick to a 1 page resume. Good question, and thank you for asking that. We'll try to squeeze in, let's see, maybe two more questions here. We are getting close to running out of time. But this person says, one item that gives away your age is when you get to your degrees. Should you put the year you got your degree? We touched on this one already, but just to reiterate, no, don't include it on your resume. If it's asking on the application and it won't let you move on until you have filled in something, you could go with the 4 nines or the 4 zeros for the graduation year. Good question though, and thank you for asking. Let's go ahead. Okay, so another good one here. How can I tell if a request for an interview is a scam or not? This is a really, really good question because a lot of scammers do try to target people that are looking for, remote or work from home jobs. What we will do, I'll actually add a resource about avoiding scams to the recording that's going to be sent out, because this is a topic that we could talk about for a long, long time. But a couple things to note. So a request for an interview, if you did not actually apply for that job and someone is offering you an interview, that's a little bit of a red flag. If they are, asking for a lot of personal information, like your date of birth, obviously like your social security number, any of your financial information, that should be a really big red flag. If the interview is, solely over, text, like a messaging or text on your phone, and then all of a sudden you're being offered the job, that should be a red flag. If there is, sort of an overwhelming sense of urgency, like they're pushing you to provide them with this, personal information, or pushing you to accept the job, things like that, that should be a red flag for you. If they are, telling you you have to pay a fee in order to interview, like all of these things should be red flags that you want to keep your eye out for. But I will, like I said, add a resource or two about avoiding scams to the recording that's going to be emailed out to you, because that is something that we are very passionate about here at FlexJobs. It is, really, really pretty sad that people would, target those who are looking for a job, and potentially in a financially difficult time in their life. So yes, we are very passionate about trying to protect people from scams. So I'll send out some resources for that. But thank you for asking that. And then one last question that I will try to squeeze in. I saw this one earlier and I wanted to make sure to address this because, I think that it's something that a lot of us can relate to. So this person shared that, they have a disability, they're a military veteran, they have an MBA and a doctorate, they have an executive level certificate. They also have a pretty significant gap in their work history since 2017, but they were volunteering until about 2021. And they are running to an issue that they are sometimes seen as overqualified for some roles, but other times they are dealing with issues because of their work history gaps. So they're running into this situation where they aren't able to find that kind of sweet spot, so to speak. They're either seen as overqualified, or people have concern about their gaps. So keep in mind here that you control what you include on your resume and what you share with the employer in the application or during the interview, what you include on your LinkedIn profile. So a couple things here in terms of being overqualified, because you have a lot of high level degrees and certifications. Think about each resume that you're putting out for each application. Which of those degrees are going to be relevant to that role? Chances are it's not all of them. It might just be one, it might just be two. You can remove things from your resume that aren't going to be relevant, that might be making you appear to be overqualified. So that would be my biggest thing. One of the things that I always tell people, because a lot of folks, if they're maybe coming out of retirement or something like that, they're looking for something that is a step or two down what they were probably doing when they retired. So, an example that I would give you, like maybe you were in like a supervisory role previously, and now you're trying to apply for something that's more of an individual contributor. I would reword and maybe even pull out some of my bullet points from that supervisory role so that the focus isn't entirely on the fact that I was in charge of a team and leading and managing other people. I would talk more about how I would support people in doing the thing, the individual contributor thing that I'm now applying for. So you control that narrative. You decide what gets to go on that resume, what goes in that LinkedIn profile, what's discussed about in an interview. So maybe omit some of the things that aren't going to be relevant or are kind of too high level that could make you appear to be overqualified. So that's how I would address that aspect. In terms of the gaps, we have if you look in the handouts tab, the one that's titled samples, templates, and scripts, we have some good examples in there of how you could list a career gap on your resume, and you could do the same thing on your LinkedIn profile. And then also like explain some of the things that you were doing during that time. Like you mentioned how you did some volunteering during your career gap. Yes, it wasn't during the entirety of your career gap, but it still counts. You could put that in there in your career gap that you spent time volunteering. Maybe you took some online courses. Maybe you've just been spending time like researching and identifying top remote organizations. You were doing more than just watching your favorite TV show or something like that. So build out that career break entry a little bit as well to show that you were staying professionally active in some way, shape, or form, even though you weren't officially employed. So that'll help with the career break aspect there. But the main thing here is just making sure that you're paying attention to the jobs that you're applying for, and you are kind of tailoring your experience and how you're describing your experience in a way that is going to kind of match each resume that you're putting out. And I know that that can be, kind of frustrating and challenging because it's time consuming, but really taking that quality over quantity approach can really, really pay off. So I definitely recommend doing that. So hopefully that was helpful for you. I know that's got to be a really frustrating, situation to be in. So I definitely feel for you there, but I hope that advice was helpful. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today. I really, enjoy when we get to have this kind of thoughtful conversation during our Q&A. Really hope that the information in the presentation was helpful for you, as was, the information in the Q&A. Really encourage you to check out some of our future webinars as well. We have a pretty cool one going on tomorrow. It's actually with an external presenter. Her name is Lizette Sutherland. And this webinar is titled Flexibility in the Future of Work, Navigating RTO or Return to Office Mandates with Confidence. So that's happening tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And then we have another good one on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern called How to Navigate the Remote and Flexible Job Market Trends in 2024. So consider checking out some of those webinars we have coming up or webinars, in future weeks. But again, really appreciate you all taking the time to be here. Hope that this was helpful for you, and I wish you all the best of luck in your job search. Take care.